Espinoza,
Here.
Comitas, Landers,
Here.
Rapp, Williams, Schrader.
Yeah, here.
And Director of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have a motion for approval of the regular meeting agenda. I move to approve the regular meeting agenda. And a second? Second. And roll call.
Schrader,
Yes.
Landers,
Yes.
Comitas,
Yes.
Espinoza,
Yes.
Cos.
Yes.
Okay, do we have any visitors or public comment this evening? Okay. And motion for consent agenda, please.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, including the disposition of minutes for September 2023, payment of bills, district treasurer's report, interest and activity fund report, cafeteria report, and personnel report.
In a second?
I'll second.
And roll call.
Cos,
Yes.
Espinoza,
Yes.
Comitas,
Yes.
Landers,
Yes.
Schrader.
Yes.
Okay. Informational items, FOIA.
Just one was included in your packet.
And onto our reports.
Yeah, I had a couple of things, before we get to our auditor presentation. Next month, so the end of our calendar year also marks the end of our 5-year copy lease renewal cycle. And so, currently working with our existing vendor who has had great reliability with us, to see what that looks like. Regardless, there's gonna be a cost savings with our renewal. We're just trying to figure out exactly how much that's gonna be and what that's gonna look like. So look for something, coming your way in November, for an approval. Also, as I had mentioned in, one of my updates, can't say enough great things about the continued relationship and cooperation with the high school district. You know, we, are gonna have our kindergarten and first grade Christmas concert over in their auditorium. We're super excited about that. We have our upcoming next week. We have a Shared Teacher Institute where we're getting a bunch of teachers together. And so, again, I can't say enough good things about the relationship as it continues there. Also, next month, some things that we've been talking about, we'll see some actual we're starting to see some actual installation in November, specifically solar panels and surveillance cameras. So those will start next month.
Very good. And auditor.
Okay, we have Andrea Meyer here from Newkirk, and so I know that if memory serves, actually last year we had Bill and his son,
Okay.
and so
I couldn't convince mine to make the trip. It's a soccer night.
yeah, so I don't know that you've actually been here to present.
I have not.
But welcome.
Thank you. So in front of you, you have our audit report, and if you flip inside to the front cover is our letter to the board, which is you guys. Our professional standards require that after the audit is over, we communicate certain things to you, the board. So what you'll find in there is if you flip to page 2, some of the things that we're required to communicate to you is whether we had any disagreements with management or if we had any trouble completing our audit. And I'm pleased to say that everything went smoothly. There were no disagreements. It was a very clean, easy audit this year. We also did not have very many audit adjustments. If you flip to page 4, you will find a list of the audit adjustments that we did make, and there were only 3 of them. So nothing significant there. They were mostly reclassifications and an allocation for special ed transportation that we make every year. So nothing out of the ordinary there. And then the final page discusses material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal control. It just kind of gives you a definition of what those are, and we did not identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses as part of our audit. It doesn't mean that there aren't any, it just means that the procedures we performed, nothing came to our attention.
Andrea, if you could just give a little feedback. I know that that the audit process is very involved. A lot of information that your firm requests as an independent auditor. As you know, we've had some fairly significant reshuffling in our district office. So from an outsider's perspective, as we've moved through that transition, did you still have the things that you needed? Did the process, it seems like that they were still in place? Is everything?
So last year, well, for the previous audit, Justine handled most everything. And I would say that Denise really took over finding the reports we needed, and she helped Debbie out a lot, even helping Debbie find the reports that normally Debbie would cover. So Denise really stepped up with getting that, but we didn't have any trouble getting any of the reports or anything that we needed. I think Denise mentioned she's gonna be retiring. So I would say whoever her replacement is gonna be,
It's Socorro.
okay, you might wanna have, time to work with her before she goes, because she does seem to have a very good grasp on getting reports run out of the system. I would say that's probably the biggest thing, is just knowing how to use the system to generate the information that you need. But the transition from Justine being gone to this year, I think everything worked out okay.
Very good. Thank you for that.
So next is the actual audit. And it's got a lot in it. The Illinois ISB has their financial statements, which are pretty robust. So I'm just gonna highlight a couple things that we think would be the most useful to you. A couple pages in on page 4, ISB has set certain metrics that they measure all school districts by, like financial ratios. So you have a calculation there of those, and then they average them out. And so the highest you could get would be a 4. You're sitting at a 3.45, so that's not horrible. Out of 4, that's still really good. And then following that are ISB's financial statements, which are pretty much line by line. So there's a lot there. I think the expenditures are useful just because you can see how you compare to the budget. But for the most part, let's see, you can flip through there. There's just a lot in there to take in when you have time. So one of the useful things in there, let's see what page it would be. Starting on page 37, you will have your operating expense per pupil. And the only thing I would say about that, you can kind of compare it from year to year, is the last couple of years you've had ESSER money, so there's been a lot of spending. We're kind of winding down to the end of the ESSER money, so I think you'll start to see that come down in the coming years. It's been a little inflated these last couple of years just because you've had the ESSER money to spend it, and that's been the case for all districts. And really it was a blessing for you guys. Brad and I were talking about just how many projects you were able to get done. Okay, and then once you flip past that.
So on the very next page, on page 39, is also the calculation for the per capita tuition charge. So if, for instance, if Leland needed to have a couple of students send them our way for a program, and we needed to charge them a tuition for that, that's not something that we just make up. It's something that's auditor generated every year, and so you just pull it out of there. it's set by law and what the calculations are and how that comes out, and so all of that work is already done for us.
That's that number at the very bottom?
Yeah,
Yes.
the $8,052.
So following that are the audit opinions. And I'm pleased to say that it was an unmodified opinion, which is a fancy way of saying that in all material respects, we think the financial statements are fairly stated. That's the best opinion you could get on an audit. And there's a couple different opinions. We give an opinion on the overall financial statements, and then if you flip to page 6, there's an opinion on compliance over major programs and internal control. So that's our single audit opinion. If the district receives more than $750,000 in federal funds, you're required to have a single audit. So that one as well, we believe you complied in all material respects with all the compliance requirements. So that was a clean, unmodified opinion as well there. Following the opinions are the notes to the financial statements. It just delves a little deeper into all of the areas. Probably the most useful for you would be on page notes 11. Kind of gives you an overview of what your fixed assets were, so you can kind of see how it increased this year with construction projects being completed, building additions, such as that. And then notes 15 is an overview of the debt. And so that's useful just to kind of see in the next couple years what the payment requirements on that debt is gonna be.
So that, so that debt repayment schedule includes the working cash bonds that we just sold in May?
It does.
Okay, good.
Yes, so each one is broken out separately, so that one would be, down here in the bottom would be the ones that you just issued this past year. And then following the notes to the financial statement is the single audit and the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. So that's on page 48, and it just lists all the federal funds that were received by their CFDA number. And for a single audit, we're not required to test all the funds you got. We just need to test a certain amount. So we looked at the elementary and secondary school emergency relief grant, which is also known as ESSER. So that's where we really dived down into and did all of our compliance testing on. And then following that is just some other information that either spans 5 years or 10 years, depending on the schedule. You have a daily attendance, operating expense per pupil, so you can kind of see how it has changed over the years. And then revenue and expenditures, and then it gets into some tax data for tax levies and tax rates for the last 5 years. So are there any specific questions on the audit?
And Andrea's, and they're not joking when they talk about how thorough they are. She actually made me walk outside
We had a little field trip.
and show her the air conditioning units that we put
Oh,
in.
how funny.
So yes, not only do you have the paper trail, but yes, here they physically are.
You have to physically see that the property exists. Yes.
So you said that you guys like chose the ESSER one as your one
Mhm.
to like focus on
Mhm.
for that, was it compliance or whatever?
Yes.
So how do you choose like, cause we don't have that one every year, so like what goes behind the choice of that one?
So we have to test at least 40% of the total federal expenditures.
Okay.
So if you have, and I mean, there's also certain other things if it's deemed to be, if they have type A and type B programs, if it's type A, you have to test it, but it really comes down to a dollar amount because ESSER was so large.
Right.
We're able to test just ESSER and that qualifies for, it'll show you on page 50, just ESSER alone was 54.51% of the total expenditures.
Okay.
So then you're able to hit that threshold. If you didn't have ESSER, there might be testing of, say, like the nutrition program and IDEA, and you might have to test several of them to get up to that threshold, but it all has to do with the dollar amounts, and it changes every year because the grant money changes every year.
Okay, thank you.
And as you guys have time to peruse it, if you come up with any questions in the next couple of days, feel free to reach out to us. Brad can give you my contact information, and we're happy to answer any questions if any arise.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yep. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Moving on to our curriculum director.
How's it going, everybody?
How are you?
Not too shabby. Give you a copy of that. Well, okay.
Thank you.
So Brian and I were talking about some things to talk about, and kind of wanted to hit some of our early benchmark testing. We use FastBridge. We do that 3 times a year: fall, winter, spring. We used to use go back Ames Web. We've used MAP over the years. It's been a long time since we used them. One of the big things with FastBridge is its national norm. So it gives us a national way to compare us to not just within ourselves. We have 5 classrooms in each grade, K5, 6, sorry, in K1. But so we can compare there, but we also can compare ourselves to the national, which is important when you're looking at those benchmarks. We use that data for figuring out if kids are tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. So for example, tier 3 kids are kids who perform the lowest. They're the ones who need the most extra help, interventionists, whether go see Stacey O'Brien over at Lincoln or Michelle Nurnberg over at Blackstone, Melissa Blum over here at Northbrook. So it helps us place those things. Tier 2 is kind of the group that we really love to hit that sweet spot. They need help, but probably not too much intervention to be able to get back into tier 1, which is the mainstream. And it gives us ideas that if there's too many people in tier 2 and tier 3, then we can look and go, okay, we need to work on the core. We need to work in the whole classroom because it's a core issue. So the first page there, front and back, gives you kind of a historical breakdown of our scores with FastBridge. You'll notice kindergarten, they don't test in the fall and winter, largely because, well, they can't read. It's really that simple. And so there's no scores there, but then if you follow the fall categories, first grade tests, we call it early math and early reading, which is literally what it sounds like. It's those early foundational skills. One of the conversations we're having, and it's difficult, is when you get to second grade, they switch over to something called A Read and A Math, which are kind of the all-encompassing snapshot of your reading ability and your math ability. And it is just a snapshot, there's subtests to it. But what's hard is there is a real switch from first grade into second grade of what's being tested. Just like as you get into third grade, when you start taking the IER, suddenly things look very different. So one of the conversations we're having is trying to, get our second graders prepared for what it's going to look like. And it's hard because there's no way to prepare them for what that test is going to be until you take the test. So we use, especially for second grade, we use that fall number as kind of an indicator, but we always kind of expect that to shift as we move to winter, particularly for second grade, because, well, they've acclimated to what the test looks like, it's a little more familiar with them. One of the big things in curriculum and all data and testing, we want to make sure that we're testing knowledge and not their ability to actually navigate a test. So for example, access tests for our ESL and bilingual students. One of the parts is you literally put a headset on and you talk. And historically, we didn't do a whole lot of that until it got to access time. And kids would shut down, they'd be embarrassed to talk because there's multiple people on headphones. And so we started trying to pair them with their friends. So, hey, you won't be as embarrassed to talk in front of this group. This year, Sandy Seamer, who's, my partner in crime here for ESL, over here in Northbrook, she took over for Lauren Merkins. She's having them use headphones basically every day, different activities, different things, normalizing it, so that when it comes around, you're not going, well, they got nervous in front of putting the headset on. We're not testing that. We wanna make sure that's not the problem. Taking a test on a computer, that's just the way it is. I know the high school, just came over and did the PSAT.
Yes, sir.
Brad doesn't want me to call it PSAT.
Not a thing.
What do you guys call it? But they came over and they were incredibly nervous. I have other friends who are administrators in high schools that do the PSAT, and they're freaking out about it because there's a lot of issues with the websites crashing. And they're like,
Yeah.
again, now you're not testing, can the kids, do they know this? It's how can they navigate? Do they give up because they're bored? They're frustrated? We want to eliminate those things. So it gives us some good data on the back. Kind of gives us some snapshots there. You can kind of see the low risk plus college pathway totals for the last 5 testing periods. So it breaks it down in FastBridge. You have college pathway, which is people in the 85th percentile and above. You have low risk, which is the 40th percentile to basically 84.9. And those are the ones that, the way they explain it is they're going to get there. Those are the ones we're not really worried about. They may not be there right now, but they will get there. But then it also breaks down into, the high risk and the extreme risk. And so those are the kids that we are usually our tier 2, tier 3 kids really on our radars right from the get-go of these are the ones who need that early intervention. They're the ones who are going to need the most help. We got to make sure we're giving them the energy and time. You can see at the bottom there, it gives you kind of the fall scores year to year. So we're at 53%, which would be it's not the same thing as meets and exceeds low risk and college pathway. 53% for reading, 48% for math, which is up from last year, and it's up significantly from 2 years ago. One of the things that we talk about, and you're around education enough, you hear it, the COVID learning loss, we're past that. It's just, we're in a new era now. We can't blame things on that anymore. We're far enough removed. That doesn't mean we're not still trying to overcome the realities of that. Again, some of these older kids miss some very prime, integral years of quality education. And we did our best, but still not the same as full time. So we're heading in the right direction, which is why on the next sheet, this is longitudinal, and it's always weird to explain it. So, for example, if you look at 8th grade, A math there, this is actually our current 8th graders. You see fall 2023, they scored 38%, or 38 for low risk and college pathway. This is actually following their scores all the way back. So this is, because for us, one of the conversations Brad and I have and our admin team has all the time is, that's great to know how is 8th grade doing in general, but I want to know how did these 8th grade kids do last year and the year before and the year before. So this 8th grade, that's following them all the way back to fall 2018 when they first started testing FastBridge. So you can see their scores kind of move around here and there. One of the conversations we always have with data like this is, what is it telling us? And that's a very complex question. One of the things we're kind of talking about is we don't have a testing culture, and we don't necessarily want a testing culture, but at the same time we need to make sure the kids value the test and the kids are prepared for the test. One of the reasons benchmark testing is important is, the state's going to give us the IAR every spring. That's not going away anytime soon. Anyway, we can't teach the test, but we have to prepare kids to be able to take that kind of test. That's a test-taking skill. Test approaches, how tests are worded, the way the questions are set up. Make sure you can, look at this, particular reading passage and know what's being asked of you. Not only does that help you on these kind of tests, but it also helps you as a student. And so that's one of the things we're trying to, kind of figure out and talk about some ways we can kind of shift that paradigm, making sure we, get them prepared for this, do a math question a week that is out of, used to be the park, now it's the IAR, different things like that, trying to prepare them for that. If you look at the IAR data at the bottom, that's percent meets and exceeds. I think it's the same thing, it's longitudinal, so if you see 8th grade math, that was their IAR scores last year. We did spring, so that's 7th grade, then 6th grade so far back. IAR, this is one of the conversations we're kind of having too, is we are not seeing a great correlation between our FastBridge scores. That's the whole idea of FastBridge. It predicts what our strengths are, what we need to work on. We're not seeing a great correlation right now between FastBridge and IAR results. And so one of the conversations we're having, and it's, in about a week and a half, 2 weeks, the state report card will officially be disembargoed, unembargoed, whatever the term would be. And we can talk about that when we're in detail. We can kind of break that down. But we're trying to figure out what is this showing us, what's the disconnect? Is FastBridge not the right resource for us? Do we need to look at it in a different way? That's one of the things that, we're trying to use that data to look back on. And it's hard because reality is going to be me and maybe a few other people literally going student by student going, as opposed to as a whole, it says this, it's going to be, let's look at those 120 kids, what it predicted from FastBridge, and what was their IAR result. And so those are things we're going to have to look at, and particularly for our ASL and our IEP populations who historically do not test well. It's important again to figure out, is it because they aren't prepared for the test? Is it that they don't understand the questions being asked? Even with accommodations, they're not, meeting those needs. Or is there something in our programming that's not meeting their needs? So it's not an easy thing because like any kind of experiment, you can't just change multiple things. You have to kind of piece it together. But we are trying to, find that, hard work is it's worthwhile. It's not, I don't want to sound like it's all bad news. There is a lot of good news here too. A math and A reading, for example, A math is up 3% from last fall, 7% from 2021. A reading's up 4% from last fall, 7% from 2021. When you look at the graphs, and that's just kind of the visual of there, again, the low one says low risk. On the left side of your sheets is going to be FastBridge. The one on the right is the IAR. And again, that's their individual grades. So 8th grade, you can see that, for reading, they had a 36 on the IAR, meets and exceeds, which is great. It's definitely heading in the right direction. So that was them as 7th graders, because they tested last spring. And in the 6th grade, they were at 20. In 5th grade, they were at 13. So again, they're shooting up, but we're not seeing that same growth across the board. And again, there's always the natural ebb and flow. You can have 100 kids in a grade, and just whatever's in the water that year, there's a lot of kids who are just gangbusters for school. And some years you don't have as many of those kids. So we know that happens, but we're trying to unpack that and looking at that data. What can that show us? What can that lead us to get better? That's the ultimate goal of all the stuff. State testing, I don't think anybody loves it, but it does give us a piece of the puzzle. And that's how we view it. It's just another snapshot of what our kids are doing, what we're doing as a district, what can we do to get better? And that helps us design curriculum, that helps us have the conversations. I know we have our CSS committee. We're always trying to find and build this continuity across the district. And so this is one of the things that helps us, again, kind of unpack some of those things.
Yeah, I think we have a really high confidence in the data that we're getting from FastBridge. We use it quite a lot. Every kid sees it at least 3 times a year. The kids who are in Tier 2 and Tier 3 see it more often than that. And so with a high confidence that is really good data to see where we need to improve and where we need to refocus on things. What Tyler was talking about, making sure that it's not the format of the test that is getting kids hung up. The fact that our IAR scores, some of them actually decreased this year. We really need to unpack that, and because the IAR questions are written in a very specific manner, and a lot of that is kind of test taking ability. And full disclosure, that's something that we've walked away from as an organization since COVID. We are not, it used to be that we would give an IAR, well then it was called PARC, we would give a PARC practice problem, a reading passage or a math problem, almost every day leading up, getting kids to, this is exactly what it's gonna look like to still be ready for it. And we completely stepped away from that. And so, one of the conversations that, we're set to have next week, as an administrative team, and then, at our next CSS meeting, which is in November, is just that, is how much of that, the IAR is by far our most public test score, okay? But if it's not giving you nearly as great of data as you're getting in other places, you know, how much do you need to focus on it? Well, you can't completely ignore it either, and so it's the internal conversation of what that looks and where we are with that, because I think it's pretty clear that we're not preparing our kids as well as we could for what that test is gonna look like.
Well, and there's no easy way, because, you know, we don't get the data back until, you know, the kids have all left for the summer. You can't go, hey, Billy, hey, Johnny, you know, why didn't you do well here? You know, says he should be doing higher on the score. They don't know. You know, is it, you know, test burnout? Is it in the spring if they're not taking it seriously? Is it they get, again, like you said, get to the test and they're like, I'm not understanding what's being asked of me.
Yep.
You know, and again, we have those kind of anecdotal conversations with kids all the time, so we get ideas of what some of the struggles are. Again, particularly with the program I do with ESL and bilingual, we know those have been issues. That's one of the things we're really trying to hit, is to remove those barriers. But again, it's one of those things we're trying to, you know, unpack that puzzle, and we're not the only district. You know, that's one of the things that, you know, you can look at, and one of the things that I'll share with you guys after the report comes out. We always kind of compare us to like-sized districts, like population districts, and kind of see where are we falling in that. That's one of the things that historically we find everybody's kind of in the same mix of it. That doesn't mean anybody's happy with it. I don't want you to feel like we're complacent. We're definitely not happy with it. We know that we need to figure out what's kind of going on and work on that. And I feel like we have the right direction. It's just a matter of getting more data in there and kind of figuring out what's working, what's not, how do we address it. Again, I can't say enough good things about our CSS committee. We've, I think, opened a lot of our own eyes, and we have these great conversations, kind of going, oh, that is it, you know, we should all have the same common language across the buildings. You don't think about that until somebody says it, and you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So that's another great thing I think we're doing.
How does the choice of curriculum and use of curriculum aligning, is there any thought to, I know you mentioned like sometimes you pull an example problem out, but why are the problems so different between what we're doing on a daily basis? Why does it have to be a totally different learning curve to learn how to, if assessments are gonna be like this for
Yeah.
kids as they move through?
I think it's multifold. I think a lot of the curriculum that we're using was written in the 20-teens. And with the learning loss that happened with COVID, a lot of people aren't on the grade level, the Lexile level, that these books were written at. So some of it's that. You know, if you're looking at a puzzle, they have maybe 10 of the 12 pieces they need. And so the problem is if you don't have all 12, you're not gonna get the full picture. And so, you know, they don't realize sometimes that they're missing this little scaffolding piece somewhere, especially in math, where that's such a building block kind of subject. So I think it's part of that. We know just from, again, I do pre-K surveys with parents, things like, and I'm guilty of this myself, screen time at home. Kids are not reading at home in anywhere near the numbers they used to 5 years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago. You know, they're not going home and reading, which means they're not getting as fluent in literature, which means instead of being, you know, having 80% of your class on level, you're gonna be closer, maybe 50%. Now, we're gonna get them caught up if they're participating actively in class. You know, every teacher's gonna be like, hey, the number one thing you could do is read at home. Have them read to you. Have them read to the dog. You know, that's the best way to get better at reading. So I think some of it's that. Curriculum is trying to do that. Curriculum is shifting, the way we understand, like the science of reading, some of you guys heard those buzzwords. So the approach to reading has, the data's been out for a while, but it's kind of a groundswell has kind of shifted toward the science of reading. So some of it is just shifting that. For example, one of the biggest reading programs over the last year was Fontenay and Pinnell, and it's been completely obliterated and said, absolutely not, nobody should be using this. You know, once they started analyzing the data a little more in depth, they're like, this is not best practice at all. But that was one of the biggest reading programs in the entire country, one of the most popular. So that's one of the always challenges, you know, because we always talk about when you bring a curriculum, you need to do it with fidelity. You got to do what it's telling you to do. That's how you can figure out if it's working and successful. And so it's hard when, you know, people don't have buy-in. I'll be honest, adopted a new reading curriculum. Our teachers have not loved our reading curriculum. They weren't in love with it, and then COVID hit, and now they absolutely they're getting through it, is what they're doing. And that changes things. There's real excitement for, what we're gonna pick, coming next. And kind of see, kind of refresh. So I think it's a little bit of mix of everything. There's not just one simple answer. Does that answer your question? I know
No, I know it's kind of like different schools of thought. You talked about like moving away from the idea of like the test taking, but, which I understand the importance of learning, like that's the ultimate goal. But if it's a test they're gonna take all the way through and it's gonna look similar to tests they're gonna have to take for college and everything else, we wanna make sure we're not giving them a disadvantage by making that decision to not be.
Oh, yeah, and again, it's one of those things that, like, in our old math curriculum, they had specifically very deep in its resources, something called Power Up for Park, which would be like a problem a week. They're gonna, focus on, again, just a strategy. And again, if you think about it that way, like, let's talk about a strategy for approaching a question like this. That's teaching 101. Some people are, we're teaching the test. No, I'm not sitting there, I'm not gonna spend 2 months boot camping this for the test. That doesn't help us, doesn't help the kid. Again, depending on how the books are written, depending on how our curriculum is written, sometimes a state will do more geometry. And it's like, well, we haven't covered that at this point yet, because they're gonna do it in May, or what, so sometimes it throws off like that, so sometimes we try to rebuild our curriculum around that. So it's kind of that, sorry, I'm trying to sneeze. Sorry. Trying to figure out what the be all end all is, and it's gonna be a mix of everything. Again, we know we need to get kids excited about testing, why it matters. And we had the same experience when we first started doing FastBridge for benchmarking. We knew we had some kids, and I'm not gonna say who, obviously, but some of our best math kids completely fail the math test in 8th grade. We're like, what? They're literally at the high school doing algebra, and they were some of our lowest scorers in the entire 8th grade group. And they're like, well, I didn't try. That's some of our best kids. And, you can't make people care, but if we create a culture where they see the value in it, and it is hard, because, again, colleges are, a lot of colleges now require an ACT, SAT. So, right now we're still continuing to do those testings at the high school, and obviously that trickles down, and again, that becomes data, but is there gonna be a point in the future where, well, why are we spending the time, energy, money, and resources for it if it's not gonna be required? I mean, that's not happening now. Again, this, how do you find value? Well, it gives you, again, Brad and I talk about this all the time, it gives us a data point. It gives us an idea. Again, there's a disconnect. They're not performing on the IAR the way we expect them to, the way our data says they should. And so is our data wrong? Is that the conversation? Or is there a disconnect with how we're preparing them, or, again, their energy level, their care, their concern? Again, I understand, like, some kids are heavily tested. Again, 8th graders just did the PSAT. If you're ESL bilingual, you're taking Access in January. The state's required us to do the NAEP this year for 8th grade. Then they're gonna take the IAR. That's a lot, in addition to all your normal things. But again, you think about it, when you were a kid, you did it. It's just part of school, we get the little Scantron, the little bubbles, and you did it. So again, it's just one of those things we have to get that expectation of, like, we prepare for this. It's maybe a weird day because we're testing, but it's stuff that you're prepared for. That's kind of where we have to get to, is like, you can do it. I don't know, it's an assembly, a pep rally, like, hey, we're gonna do awesome. We're gonna knock it out of the park. I don't know what the answer is. How that works for 3rd grade is probably different for 7th graders who are a little more jaded. But again, those are things we're gonna have to, sometimes just trial and error. It is just one of those things that, again, part of teaching is you can't be afraid to try something new. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, and we try something else, we keep going to our tool belt.
Yeah, so when, this will be obviously a huge part of our November CSS meeting. I think that Principal Daly is presenting in December, so she can update us on what some of those things are.
I think it's important too to not, and we keep talking about student voice, the importance of student voice, and so, like, how do you, or can you make some points within this data digestible to the kids to understand, and to, I don't know that I would complicate the difference between FastBridge and IAR, but like, look, this is where you were last year, like, this is where we want you to be, this is where, you are, like, understanding a little bit about their own scores, but then their scores as a collective, and the importance of doing well, and maybe even asking some of them, like, what do you feel like on test days? What is, what? Is
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, we know, like, again, I use access testing. So you need to score a 4.8 on the access test to be able to exit out of required programming school. And last year was the first year with Lauren Merkins and I, like, really kind of started talking to the kids about their scores. This is where we were at last year. Obviously, there's usually a little bit of a natural growth anyway. But for some of the kids, they go like, hey, we want you around, but wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to come down here? You know, if you develop the skills in your, bilingual process and your evolution as a student to not require that extra support, but just be beneficial if that's something, And that was the first year we started talking about it, and kids started talking about their scores, and we started preparing them, and we had more kids exit out. And then the kids who didn't, who were like 4.5, 4.6, they're like, and like, they were frustrated, and they're like, oh, I didn't get there. Like, yeah, but look at you made more growth than what was projected. And so it became one of those conversations that, those kids come in this year like, oh, I'm getting out. Because they bought into the value and why it's important.
Right.
And obviously that it's a little bit different for them because that's programming. They can get out of coming down to hang out with Sandy Seymour. They can go into an enrichment RTI or something like that. So some of it matters. Some of them want to be around their friends, and different sports like that. But it is one of those things they found value in it. And again, think about your own lives. The more you find value in something, the more excited and enthusiastic you approach things. So again, like, we know it's part of the process, and again, I think you're right. Maybe it's a conversation with our admin to figure out a way. I don't know if a survey is the right way, but maybe having those conversations, like maybe a student focus group kind of thing, especially at the junior high.
Right.
Like, hey, when you take these tests, what are you thinking? What do you care about? Those are all things that gives us, again, I use that phrase, pieces of the puzzle.
Do we have any data on their social emotional health correlating with what their scores are, whether it's individually or as a whole?
I have not cross-checked that. We have data for FastBridge. We use something called My Sabers. The lower grades use Sabers, where it's teacher kind of looking at social health kind of issues, emotional health issues. The higher grades, they do a self-evaluation, which could also help our counselors and our social worker kind of figure out, so these kids, should we be worried and maybe put them on our radar for things, for checking and stuff like that. We have not used it that way, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. Again, that's the, I'd say, fun thing about data is that you start trying to look at that. And again, that's one of the things that, you go back even 10 years ago, the conversation of social and emotional health of students was not a big part of the conversation. You had a few teachers that were like, okay, you hippie, give them a hug, that was, it's, now we understand it's a vital part of the kid's well-being, and largely because, especially looking at our community, we have a high rate of, socioeconomic need. The world has drastically changed. Kids growing up in a very different world, and again, technology is great, it's accessibility, it's creativity, all these things, but it's also a disconnect. Kids walk down the hall, texting the friend right next to them instead of having that conversation. So there's a lot of those things that, that makes it that much harder when you don't understand, you don't build those relationships. Relationships are safety nets in society. The more connected to people you are, the stronger you tend to be, both a student, parent, community member. And so we know this, so that's actually not a bad idea to look at those things and try to see if there's any intersectionality.
The other thing that I wondered if there was any connection between was grades within their classes. So I know sometimes I've been surprised going like, oh my gosh, you're like getting an A and everything, and then this isn't what I expected this test to look like, or vice versa. And so I just wonder too if that's another piece of the puzzle to determine, is it the test, or is it that we're maybe thinking that the kid's doing great in class because they're kind of checking the boxes here, but in reality the takeaway is when it's time, for the rubber to hit the road, they're not?
I know individual principals and their teachers during team meetings like that are having those conversations for sure. It's always harder in fall when you don't know the kid,
Right.
because the whole idea is we test them almost right off the bat. So you it's kind of a blank canvas that way. But then you don't know, okay, is this indicative of this kid's ability? You can kind of, a lot of times you've had conversations with previous teachers, you can look it up in online and kind of get an idea. But you really kind of we're at that point now, like, okay, this kid's test score said they're kind of in the middle of the pack, but all their work shows that they're one of the best kids in the class. So was this a bad test day? Was it they don't care about testing because that doesn't impact anything they're doing? That's where those conversations I think will be helpful of trying to again, every kid, I love my kids. My oldest is a nerd. He's a full-hearted, heartbeats nerd. And he wants to be the best at every single test he ever does. I've already gotten 3 texts tonight, like, are you gonna do spelling words with me tonight? He's been doing them all week. He knows every single one. He knows the definition, but he wants to do them again because he wants that 100% tomorrow. When I was testing with FastBridge, I had him do a sample as a sample student here. He's like, where did I fall in your district? That's what he wants to know. He wants to be the best. Again, I don't know every kid is that. My other kid is not that. He's bright, but he doesn't care. So again, we have to hit all the kids. We are, each grade's 85 to 125 kids. We have different personalities, and that's what's great about them, but it's also challenging about them is figuring out motivations and abilities and.
I have a couple questions. So, with the FastBridge, can parents, I know I got a copy from our teacher of like some of the results from that one that they took at the beginning of this school year, but like, is there a way to share that with parents to like kind of go over with their kids and maybe like some of the stuff you've been talking about, like to explain to them the importance of those results or?
I know almost every teacher uses it during parent-teacher conferences.
Okay.
Usually in middle school, they'll pull it up on their Chromebook and kind of like show you and walk through it.
Yeah.
The only challenge is it's not the best thing to print off.
Yeah.
Because it's not really, you can't just print off like Billy. You have to print off all 125 kids in the grade. There's ways around it, but it's like 5 different steps. And so yeah, I know pretty much every teacher's talk about that. And again, it depends on the conversation too. Some parents want to know like, well, how are they doing? How are they compared to other ones? It's a great snapshot of FastBridge, particularly of going, this is what is showing their ability, and sometimes it's, that's not matching what they're doing in class either way, right? Like, obviously you can't just guess your way, and it's because it gets harder. You have to answer questions. I mean, maybe if you just had a really hot streak and you answered a bunch of lucky questions, but usually it's a pretty good idea of what this kid can do. And so, okay, why is this kid underperforming? You have that conversation like, look, they didn't try here. This is not a great example of what they do. And we've had kids who've come in and they've had really bad days and they took the test anyway, and then they're crying 20 minutes later, like, well, Dad left the house this morning. Okay, we can delete that test and have you retest. FastBridge it's not a state test, it's for our data.
Yeah.
So we've done that in a few cases when we know there's outliers. But yeah, it's one of those things that I think as we kind of move through it, parents get access to it, but it's one of those things that it's a hard thing, even with some of there's one that's called like the family, what's it called? Like family data or whatever. It does a really good job of giving you an explanation, but even then for a lot of people are like, I don't know what that's trying to tell me. And that's why it's kind of helpful to have a teacher there, kind of like, this is what it means. What does the percentile mean? Parents have heard from your kids in the 25th percentile of height. Okay, what does that mean? And so we kind of walk them through and go, like, this is what this is trying to tell them.
And can parents get any of the results from, like you said, like the self-evaluation stuff, like on their social emotional? Like, can parents get that kind of data, or is that?
I don't. That'd be. I can check with our SEL team, our social workers, and our counselor. I don't think that's shared with them. I think that's more internal for us to, again, try to figure out who needs to be on our radar. So sometimes, you're looking at kids' behaviors, and you're like, okay, they identify themselves as not necessarily being depressed, but being upset, and like that matches what we're seeing. And other times they answer questions, they don't fully get what they're saying, and like they're just answering a question honestly, and they're like, oh.
Yeah.
There are things we need to be worried about.
Well, I was just curious,
yeah.
not that like this applies to my situation, but I could see like parents maybe not realizing, because a lot of times I hear from a teacher at parent-teacher conferences like, your son has been doing this, and I'm like, I had no idea their behavior is that different from what I see at home, and like that'd be interesting if parents could see, like social emotional, how they feel they're doing or how they're doing at school, because it's kind of a different person there than they are at home. So
And that's something we can look into. I don't know the parameters off the top of my
How that
head
would
for
work,
with
yeah.
well, not only just how it would work, but with especially when you get to the junior high when they do it themselves. I don't want to say it's a privacy issue because I mean, it's
Yeah.
not necessarily that, but we want them to be honest. That's also why like they've
That's
rolled
true.
out
Yeah.
forms where people can be like, hey, this kid said this and I'm worried about them.
Yeah,
Those
that's
those
true.
those are because one of those things that unfortunately we live in a time where that stuff's way too common.
Yes.
We have to be aware of those things. So I mean that's something I'm happy to look into.
No, that's a
I mean,
good point.
well, again, I think about it as a
Yeah.
parent too.
Yeah.
I know, again, I know my kids are largely who they are around us. At the same time, how they act at home, or act around peers, and act around teachers, and
Yeah.
like my boys fight like cat and dogs at home all the time. They don't really do that at school. Maybe a little bit here and there. And so when the teachers hear like they're fighting, like what? Well, they say that's a good thing. They feel safe at home that they can fight and they feel like, but like their behavior at school looks different than behavior at home. That's one of those things
But I
that.
think the conversation of if we are collecting data and having at least an understanding of what some of our kids' social emotional levels might be,
Yeah.
how are we,
How does it
when it's appropriate, how are we communicating that with parents?
Yeah.
So I think
Parent
that's-
get a letter.
So I think that's a really good internal conversation
Good
for us to
question,
have,
yeah.
I really
And
appreciate
I'm
you bringing
glad
that
to
up.
hear that that's a part of the testing, or that there's some data being collected on that, cause I didn't realize, I'd never heard about that as being part of it, so that
Well,
made
and
me
it goes
feel good
well.
that you're doing that, yeah.
It goes well if we do Second Step. It's our
Mhm.
social emotional program throughout the district. And one of the things, I was at Northbrook as assistant principal before, and they were doing it before everybody else was. One of the things we've seen, and it's not just what we're doing at school, I don't pretend it is, it's a shift in culture and society and the way kids talk and everything. Kids have a much better understanding of the words to use to describe situations. They have a stronger confidence in speaking up when they see things that they deem to be inappropriate, injustice, racist, all those things, which is awesome. And it's one of those things that kids should be empowered to have a voice.
Yeah.
Not everyone wants to do it publicly, which is understandable at that age, any age. But it's one of those things that we're seeing definite benefits from that. And just as an educator, and I know if there's ever concern, obviously our social worker, counselors, principals, teachers will definitely reach out. But again, like sometimes you're like, that's just not how I envisioned
Mhm.
them going. Or like you think your kid's gonna be the one who's gonna be the nicest kid to the new kid who moved in. And you're like, well, they're giving him a hard time. What?
Mine?
Those are conversations that you want to know. As a parent, just kind of figure out like, how do I address this at home? What you want to know who your kid is when they're not around you.
I have one final question
Yeah.
that's kind of a little, like, still in this subject, but off topic of the test results. Have you gotten any feedback from, teachers or staff or anything on the new math curriculum that we purchased, and how's that going?
So the original kind of pushback was always going to be like, oh, I don't want to have to change everything.
Right, I know
That's
that's
kind of the
hard.
natural.
Yeah,
So far, most people seem that like they're actually using it. I know kindergarten rolled theirs out a little later than everybody else, just because again the natural evolution of having to learn letters and everything else. But most people seem to be on board. One of the great things with this particular package we got from HMH is coaching. So we have multiple virtual coaching opportunities throughout the year. We'll have another session in November, and then we actually have an in-person one later in the year. So a big part of it is, the conversation we've had as Evan, like, I want every teacher that teaches math to at least fully understand how to navigate, how to access, how to use the entire, suite of everything. If you don't know how to do those things by the end of the school year, you're willfully choosing not to.
yeah.
We're gonna get all of that PD out there, and because the big thing is we're gonna have natural turnover with teachers, whether they leave district, whether they retire, whatever. So the big thing is if there's a new teacher in 3rd grade, we want the other teachers to be able to support them and help them along the way, along with ourselves as admin. So most of the feedback's been pretty positive. There was definitely some hiccups early on. Getting online, they were going through, I forget what they call it, maintenance phase. Some service degradation was happening, which is really just saying it wasn't connecting well. But that was like the first week, which is unfortunate, but I haven't really had the same issue since then.
That's good.
So it seems to be going pretty well. One of the things we're kind of looking at, there's the component to it called Waggle, which is kind of a little bit of an intervention piece. That, again, that's gonna be our biggest question as we kind of unfold throughout the year. Is that worthwhile? Do we still need to use IXL, which we currently have purchased? Kind of figure out what the best path is. Just because it's free and bundled in doesn't mean it's the best option. It just means it's free and bundled in. So why shouldn't we look at it? But yeah.
How do you gauge that with them? Do you give them like a survey or like throughout it to say, hey, is this meeting what you thought?
Yeah, so the plan was to survey them again in December, kind of with about half a year-ish. You know, and, you know, I've reached out to a lot of the teachers, and I understand, I'm administration, so not everyone wants to. But very, like, if you have any issues, you need to let us know. When we have our coaching sessions, again, the first one was we assigned one person from each grade to go, just because of size, we want to make sure it was functional. But we put out a Google form of, give me every problem, every issue, every concern that you have, and it was anonymous. So nobody felt like, I don't want to admit that I don't know how to do this. No, it was completely anonymous, and then we made sure that they answered everything. We recorded the session so we could share that feedback with everybody. And again, what was frustrating, I know some teachers going into it like, oh, I want this answer, because they had told me individually I want this answered. And then afterwards, they're like, they didn't answer. I'm like, did you watch the video that I shared? And because they answered like at minute 15. So I think that's some of that frustration. I think that's a natural part of life, is that people want the shortcut to things sometimes. And I get that, because teachers, everybody, but teachers work hard.
Don't have
You know,
time.
especially K-5 when you're teaching every subject. You know, that's a lot of stuff. You know, again, teachers are excited for our new reading curriculum we're going to pick out, but they're also going, oh, I have a new curriculum. It's, you know, again, excitement, but at the same time, it's a change.
You know, and Tyler definitely has some kind of formal feedback mechanisms that he uses. But one thing that you might not know is he's very much an out and on-campus administrator. He schedules time over at Blackstone, he schedules time over at Lincoln, he schedules time in Northbrook, and so does a really good job connecting with teachers and getting that kind of you know, qualitative feedback as well as kind of the hard surface, and so we're very fortunate that he has that approach. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sometimes I hide in the office, they don't know I'm there. Well, they know, but then they walk in like, oh yeah, it's Tuesday.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Some busy days.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And again, if you have questions, again, I am more than happy to answer them. Again, once the state report card comes out at the end of the month officially, again, I'll be sending you guys an email with some data breakdowns and stuff like that as well. But if there's anything I can do for you, let me know.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Tyler.
You too.
Okay. We had no board committees or reports. We need to move on to the action item of the audit and AFR. Do you wanna say anything about it? Just an acceptance.
I can't say anything that Andrea didn't.
Okay, do you have any other questions about it? No? Okay, so if we have a motion to approve, please.
Motion to approve the audit and AFR as presented.
Second? Second.
Schrader,
Yes.
Landers,
Yes.
Komitas,
Yes.
Spinoza,
Yes.
Cos.
Yes.
The ComEd Transformer News.
So Lincoln, let's start with Lincoln.
Yay.
Yeah, so everything's fine in Lincoln, so ComEd's given their approval to move forward with that. ComEd has said, and again, put this in the context of what it is. At both Blackstone and at Northbrook, we said whatever the number is, we're gonna have to draw X amount of power through your transformer in order to run all of our air conditioning. They said that's fine, the transformer can handle that. But when we said we're gonna put the exact same amount of power and produce that in solar and run it back through your transformer, they said, nope, that's too much. So, but their rules, their game, right? So, so when we do the math on, and again, the way ComEd works, they charge you $30,000 per transformer, regardless of
You can just buy it on eBay.
what the, right. No, I wish.
Oh, man.
So So at Blackstone, it's really not a bad deal. It's gonna cost us an extra 11 grand, but by putting those additional solar panels on top, we're gonna recoup $73,000. And so when you do the math on it, Blackstone, pretty cut and dry, that to spend the 30,000, even though we don't want to, and make sure that we have our full contingency of solar panels on the roof. Northbrook is where it kind of gets a little dicey. It's kind of cutty, I would say it's kind of even money, and it probably leans a little bit against us. We would have to spend an extra $44,000 in order to, over 20 years, recoup 82,000. And so, quite frankly, if we put 44 grand in the bank and just let it sit there, in 20 years, it'd be more than 82,000, right? So, it's, in either case, in any of those scenarios, whether or not we upgrade transformers or don't, in all cases, we're still making money, right? We're still gonna be in a better spot than where we were by doing all of this. It's just a matter of, at Northbrook, do we want to spend a little bit more than we would in order to get at full capacity on the Northbrook roof?
Cause it doesn't mean we're not doing it, it just means we're not putting as many.
That's correct. So at Northbrook, we would only be putting in 65% capacity at Northbrook. Okay. So if you can envision an August 20th day when all the air conditioners are running and the sun is beating down, so we're using as much electricity as we can, and we're producing as much electricity as we can. In that scenario, we're still pulling 35% off the grid, right? We're not making enough to cover, what our total capacity could be. But at the same point in time, it's probably not the best financial decision to go to 100%.
That's just disappointing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So the panels will be there, but they're not running, or we just don't put as many panels up?
We will not put as many panels up.
But we're gonna put more panels up at Blackstone than we initially thought.
No,
No.
we'll be able to put all of the panels that we thought at Blackstone, and even spending the extra 30,000 on upgrading the transformers. Numbers were great, right? So at Northbrook, we would not buy as many panels and install as many panels as we originally thought. And because we're not doing that, it does create 280 grand in our budget this year to the good, which is not a bad thing. Right? So GRP Wegman is not going to bill us the $280,000 worth of solar panels that they would, because they're not putting them up.
That doesn't mean that if later on ComEd has to upgrade the transformer for another reason, we couldn't come back and approach.
Accurate.
Okay. So just hope for lightning strikes.
The other thing is they are transferable, right? It's not a huge deal to, if 5 years from now, we decide we need to take some solar panels off the roofs at Lincoln and Blackstone and bring them over here and hook them in, because whatever reason we can do that now, the solar panels are very movable. There's not a huge expense to that as well, so.
Can you remind me what we chose for maintenance for those? Are we outsourcing that, or?
We're not. So originally, we kind of thought that there would be an annual maintenance to it. But I'll just say that, our maintenance department is now in a spot where the majority, if not all of the annual maintenance we would be able to do on site. Obviously when they get up and running, we'll be given a, kind of an overview, by GRP Wegman. These are the things you need to do, how often, that kind of thing. And the vast majority of that we'll be able to do ourselves.
And the removal of them, did we ever get how that works?
Not really, and here's why. So right now, as I understand it, you can literally just throw them away. These solar panels are rated to last 40 years. 25 kind of at a minimum. And so I have no idea what the removal cost or process would be 40 years from now.
And our roof
Good
says-
chance I'm not gonna be alive.
Yeah.
So.
Is there a warranty on like damage or, I don't know how that works?
So as far as damage goes, like, with storms and weather, that kind of thing, that just rolls into being a part of our normal insurance.
Right, but is there a warranty on solar panels, like
So-
They just quit
40
working.
years?
So
Like
the,
if they're
so-
supposed to be 40 years?
so there
and-
are warranties on the panels. More importantly, there's, I wanna say a limited, meaning a year or two. There'll be a warranty on the inverters, which are really, that's the expensive part.
Okay.
Yeah.
And our roofs are expected to last 25 years, so we just redid the majority of them.
You got it.
Okay. I know we've answered this, but I'm just.
No, all good. It's a great
It's been a
conversation. So the bottom line is, if you ladies decide, let's spend the extra 30 grand at Northbrook, it's kind of, even money over time, maybe not the best, but it's great for the environment. It's not a terrible decision. It's definitely one that we can all live with. If you wanna say, let's only go to 65%, let's not spend the extra $30,000 on the transformer, put a little extra, money in this year's budget.
It's really 280 plus 30, right? When we're considering it, cause we're not spending
Correct.
280 plus we're not gonna be spending
That's
30,
correct.
so it's
Yeah,
that
cor-
amount we're spending or not spending right now.
Yep, correct. And so yeah, I think the Blackstone conversation, super easy, you spend the 30,000. If you want my recommendation on what to do at Northbrook, I really don't think it's worth it. We're still.
Was that GRP Wegmans
They did.
assessment too?
I believe their, recommendation was, you can do whatever you want.
Helpful. We'll have to chat with them about that recommendation, that's not, I'm kidding.
When do we have to like decide, cause like when are the solar panels supposed to be?
So it's gonna take about a month. So like, if the decision tonight is, yep, we're gonna do this at Blackstone, tomorrow, I'll let them know. We actually pay ComEd directly. This really actually, at the end of the day, has nothing to do with GRP. They're just facilitating this for us. And so then it's about a 30-day process for ComEd to be able to, go in, pick out a generator, schedule it out of their warehouse, schedule the crews, get everything, switched over and turned on, which will, with the Lincoln solar installation beginning in November, we would be able to kind of slot that right in line.
Does it impact anybody else around us? Like, when they move the transformers over, it's just ours? Do we get to keep the old one?
I don't know. I'm gonna guess.
It's just so crazy that you have to pay them
I'm
for
gonna
their
guess
thing that they
no.
charge you for.
I'm gonna guess because ComEd's probably gonna take that and they're
Go sell it
probably
to
gonna
somebody else.
refurbish it and sell it
Right.
to somebody else. That'd be my
Wreck
guess.
it.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
They kinda have you though, you have no option.
Zero.
And I mean, I feel like it should just be nice cause it's a school.
Right.
They don't care.
Alright, so we do need to have a vote on this, before we take official vote, does anyone have any additional questions or wanna talk about anything? Okay, then let's have a motion for, so we're gonna need to make the motion for it, at this point, it's only an upgrade at Blackstone, so, someone wants to call a motion. And then if that doesn't fail, if that fails, then I guess we would need to move on to a motion. Or no, I guess either way that's gonna pass, then maybe we should have a motion for the Lincoln.
So we don't need to do anything at Lincoln at all.
I didn't think in Northbrook.
Okay,
I
yeah.
wanna make sure everyone has a voice in the decision.
Yeah, do two separate motions, that'd be
Okay.
great, yep.
Alright, so let's first motion, for the approval of the ComEd $30,000 update to the transformer at Blackstone. Could we have a motion for that?
I'll make a motion to get a new transformer at Blackstone.
Second,
Second.
and roll call.
Cos, Espinoza,
Yes.
Cumidas,
Yeah.
Landers,
Yes.
Schrader.
Yes.
Okay, so now, I guess this will be the call, if anyone wants to call a motion for
I guess I'm
approval.
still just like, I feel like I had my heart set on like a plan for like the solar panels and like, it's just like a quick decision. I mean, I know you sent that email like a little while ago and I read it and everything, but I guess I'm just disappointed that we have to like scrap a chunk of our plan.
They did warn us of it though, GRP did, I remember having those conversations of them saying.
When we found out about the transformer.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
It's only a little piece of your heart though, no.
I know.
65% of it's still covered.
I know.
It's like Medicaid.
Oh my god, Amanda. Well, if we can call the motion, that's why I want everyone's voice to be heard. So do you wanna call a motion for it?
No, I mean, I can, but, yeah, I mean, if it's not in our best financial decision, then I'm not gonna like go against that. I just feel like,
Express your
yeah, I
sense.
just wish there was another way to like
Maybe
get
there will
around
be.
that.
The transformer could
That
explode and
lightning
they have
thing.
to upgrade it themselves.
I know a couple people.
There you go.
Do the wind energy, get all the kids out there just.
Yeah, that's the thing, there might be something new in the next year or two, doesn't mean you can't ever do it, it's not like we're scrapping the project, we're just scaling it back a little
So
bit.
we could like whatever company, I guess, that's doing, putting the solar panels up, like if we decide on just that 65% of the solar panels, like are they gonna leave the space like to put more, or are they just gonna put them in the middle and then we can't go back and add more, you know what I mean? Like, are we planning to keep that option open for down the road?
That option will certainly be open for down the road.
It's set up for expansion,
Scalable.
there we go.
Okay.
Okay, so unless anyone wants to call, okay. And then we have a couple of discussion items, delegate for the conference. I also, could you please send out the topics for the delegate assembly and I would love us, well, I guess I could do it since it's technically a school board thing, shouldn't have to fall on you. I will send it out. I think that we should, whoever's gonna be delegate should hear from everybody around the table because you're casting the board's one vote, you don't get to have separate votes. So if you feel very strongly one way or another on any of the topics, even though, I guess I'll back up a second for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. So, what the delegate assembly is every district is allowed to send one representative and cast one vote. They have a board that has gone through projects that have been presented by various schools. They've vetted those out. The board, the ISB board, has determined one way or another whether or not they recommend that you push it through or recommend that you say no to it based on what they have found, but they can't make that unilateral decision. It has to be a membership decision. So most people don't go against recommendation. However, the schools that brought it there, if they're gonna be told no, there might be a real reason why something is specific to them downstate that maybe isn't a situation that you see in the suburbs. And so they'll often talk and have comment one way or another about it, and then a vote will be cast as to whether or not the board, its lobbying, its, its strength and its influence, whether or not it's going to go towards pushing that forward or not. And so I do think it's important to hear from everybody, and if you have a strong opinion one way or another on one of them, I think it's important that we as a board have that option, so I can send those out, but I wanna make sure it's not a person's opinion, it's our board's opinion.
Nice.
I nominate Holly again.
No,
She
Holly's
can't.
unavailable.
Oh.
I know, so you win.
No, I did not say that. That's why I was quick to nominate Holly.
I can go if nobody else wants to go. I've gone once before, so I don't wanna take that chance away from anybody if they wanna go. If you literally, you have a fan on a stick and you raise it,
It's like being at an auction.
I'm dangerous at auctions, we'll buy everything. But but going in prepared is, to me, the biggest point, because when you get there, if you don't know what your board's position is on these 10 items, it's less than 10. It's not, you're not prepared. You should be able to go in and know which way your board is leaning. Do you wanna do it or you don't?
I'm not dying to do it. I will,
No one is dying. Did you wanna do it, Brenda?
I like attending the sessions.
I know, that's the crappy part, I get to do
Yeah.
it
It's,
sessions.
I believe it's
Like I
Saturday.
already started looking, I downloaded the app and started looking at all the sessions.
I believe the delegate assembly is Saturday at 10:30.
And it goes for 2 session lengths.
Yep, so it takes you up to late lunch. At 10 o'clock Saturday morning, that's when we have our walkthrough scheduled, if anybody wants to walk through the exhibit hall with me.
So like during the delegate assembly?
It would be right before. It would be like the half hour before. So whoever is the delegate could meet us all there, walk through, the exhibition hall for half an hour, and then go to the delegate assembly.
I guess I don't mind doing it if you don't wanna take from anybody else. I'll do it.
I feel bad, I don't wanna like make you do it.
It's okay. I do feel blessed. I have more learning opportunity within my world to go to other conferences like that, so it's okay.
Okay.
Don't feel bad. Unless Amanda wants to do it.
Love your eyebrows.
Okay, I'll do it. There we go.
Maybe next year.
But I am gonna send you guys an email though with the link to it, cause you can read the little summary and which school district brought it forth and then what the recommendation is from the board and whether or not we wanna stay with the recommendation or if we feel differently. Okay.
Real quick, just to go back to the, solar panel thing, like, do we need to make some kind of a motion since we're changing the solar panel plan? Like, to change.
Cause
what
we
we're
approved
gonna-
up to a certain amount and we're spending less,
We're
and we go
spending
the
less
other
than
way,
that.
it
So
would
it
be a
doesn't matter.
problem.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
just making sure, I didn't know if we.
Yeah.
No, good question. Also, just today, I emailed all of you, a link to the conference. I also emailed you a couple, pages to read, on the conference, just kind of some notes, where we're staying, what some of the processes are. Also put in there, kind of an outline of, you know, like when and where is our board dinner, you know, that kind of thing, so just kind of read through that. One change that I think I'm gonna try, unless I get feedback otherwise, Saturday night, the Howl at the Moon isn't until 6. I think it started at 5 or 5:30 last year. That creates even more issues with parade traffic, cause we're on the opposite side of Michigan. And so,
So we're pre-gaming somewhere.
yes, Callahan
Saw that on the,
is right
Yeah.
across the
That makes
street.
sense
I've
to
already
get
got
out
a
there.
spot reserved for us, and so you can, you know, grab a taxi at 3:30 or 4:30, whatever. Should be able to get
Out of there.
from the other side of Michigan before all the parade madness
how
starts.
did we get across last year?
We
Um,
went earlier. Didn't we?
I mean, I think we got there right towards the very beginning and started
Yeah, we
it, cause it
were.
wasn't crowded yet, but I don't know that we were early.
But he said it might have started like at 5 or
I think it started,
Oh.
yeah.
Early.
Yeah, it started, Halloween started a little bit earlier last year. So then Jan and I will be set up across the street at like 4 o'clock, we already got spot reserved, and so then everybody can just kind of, you know, meet there and then
Just
we'll
not
go across the street.
Yeah, we're gonna take pictures.
That's Friday night.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. If
Sounds-
anybody, I always say this every year, there are incidentals that you'll have that you can turn in costs for, as well as mileage and whatnot, but if fronting the money up front for things isn't a problem, can let you know, right? Cause we can, I know a couple of years in a row, a while back, cut some checks for estimated expenses ahead of time and then have
Yep.
receipts turned in, so
Yep,
don't
that
feel
can
like you
happen too.
need to front the cash if, you wanna make those arrangements, just let Brad know.
Yep, or, you know, if you're taking the Amtrak and you need the school to buy your ticket or whatever. And so, for you ladies that haven't gone, you can't ask me too many questions, right? That's part of my job, is to make sure that you know where you're going, comfortable with, and if, you know, when you get there, say, hey, you know, I'm here, such and such, you know, do you have 30 minutes to, you know, walk over and kind of show me where things are in the conference itself? Love to do that, so don't hesitate to,
And
both-
same with
you've got
those of us
my
that have
cell
been
number.
there, don't feel free, like you can't ask, it is
Yeah, for sure.
overwhelming the first time
For sure.
you go. But it is seriously the best learning, it is like fire hose learning though, so take lots of notes, cause it is just
It's a lot.
intense.
It's a lot.
It is intense, but it is incredible. I wish there was more opportunities. I know there's little things in between, but just
Mhm.
hearing from your peers and being able to experience that is incredible. All right, facilities.
Yes, so just to kind of continue the conversation, no decisions made tonight, but I know that when we were having this conversation last month, I think we were all kind of feeling like, we just approved a deficit budget of $2.5 million, and do we wanna spend another 1.1 million on, you know, whatever, and what's that look like and what's going on? So work with GRP to be able to kind of a la carte those things a little bit, to unpack them a little better, to see exactly what some of those pieces cost, and then develop a couple of options that are still impactful, but not as much money, in a summer as we kind of figure out, you know, when are our solar incentives gonna roll in, and what does all of that look like within the confines of, you know, this kind of, you know, these planned events. And so a couple of really good, what I think, packages they developed in the new sheet. They're listed as packages A and B. One at 708,000, one at 798,000. And the difference between the two basically being what I'm gonna call the Northbrook porch, right? That whole awning, guttering complex on the outside there. And quite frankly, if GRP is gonna do all that work for 90 grand, we can do that better for cheaper, right? That's kind of a small enough project that we can manage and get that done, and we can kind of, you know, come up with some different ways to do that. So if you look at the $708,000 package A, the primary thing that we have to get done this summer is to get all of the glass out of the hallways in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And this does that. Okay, so it has that. It has all of the old asbestos floor removal. And it has the remodel of the teacher's lounge. And so it has all of those kind of primary pieces that we wanna get done. And so it will make a difference with respect to safety and functionality, and, it's a much better option than $1.8 million worth. All good stuff, but I think we're in a spot right now as we kind of manage our way through this. It's just.
So what's the difference between the A and B and the C and D then?
Yeah, so as you move across, when you get to B, it's the ceiling and lights and that angled glass in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade hallways. When you get over to C, it's the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade hallways and classrooms. So it's going into the classrooms.
You mean D?
No, C.
Oh, okay.
And then,
Little X's, do you see the X's?
Yeah, classrooms.
Yeah, I do, but the only difference I seen between A and B is just the exterior.
Right.
that's correct.
That's
Oh,
what
I
Yeah,
thought you
that's
said a
correct.
couple other
No,
things just now.
No,
No.
just the
Okay.
Northbrook
That's C
porch,
and
that's
D.
the only difference between
Yeah.
A and B.
Okay,
The difference between B and C is that in C, the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classrooms themselves, the ceilings,
okay.
and lights also get redone.
So could we do C without the exterior stuff?
Of course we
Or like, I mean, I know we can pick and choose,
Yep.
whatever, but,
And by the way, GRP Wakeman hates this. They don't like to, They don't like
Pick and
you,
choose.
they don't like you to dig down
don't like
in
us a la
enough to à la carte. But I'm like,
They
look,
like,
I'm like, look, Scott, I'm gonna know enough into the weeds on this, I'm gonna be able to tell, and then, so we were about 3 weeks ago, we were going through with Scott and his engineer, not Alyssa, cause you know,
yeah,
she jumped
she's-
ship,
yeah,
but with Alex, the new guy, and I'm like, so, this costs this, right? And Scott just kinda blanks there, and Alex like, yeah, that's what that costs, I'm like, this costs this, right? He's like, yeah, that's what it said, so I kinda à la carte everything.
yeah,
and-
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so just throwing this out there, not that we have to do this, but we just saved ourselves,
$300,000.
yeah, or for sure 280.
Yeah.
Cause we didn't know when we started the solar panel thing that we were gonna have to do the transformer, so to me, it's the 280 on the solar panels. Like,
Yeah.
do we want to, like, do those things right, like get those things done while they're doing the other things, and maybe it'll be cheaper than a crew coming in again and doing all that stuff later, or, I don't know.
But you have to think on the flip side, we have to remember we did pass a budget deficit of $2.7 million
$2.7.
dollars.
For
So
sure.
that 300,000 does come off of that, which
Right,
makes that
right.
sting a little less.
Yeah.
We will have, though, like you said,
Grant money.
grant money
Mhm.
will start coming in, which will balance, but what's like best case scenario on the grant money dollar again for this year?
Oh, for this year, I would have to look. I wouldn't think it would be, let's see, off the top of my head, it's 2.9 million, and I think 1.1 of that is spread out over 7 years, which means the other is 1.8. So best case scenario, we get 1.8 million this fiscal year in grant money.
Which means we would come out even.
You're pretty close. Pretty close.
And not to say that we shouldn't invest, I'm not suggesting we do nothing, I'm just saying I think that that's like the most conservative
Right, right,
opinion.
Right.
And then you go from there. I do have a question, though, like, so you talked about getting the glass out of the hallways and stuff, but we're not doing that in 5th grade in any of these plans.
So the only glass that's in the 5th grade hallway is, those side light displays. It's not even, there's no angled glass in the 5th
There's
grade
nothing in the
hallway.
ceiling, okay.
Yeah.
Cause it says removal and properly dispose of angled ceiling and glass sections in the 5th grade section.
So you're looking at an old one, because,
I don't
they didn't,
see
well, they didn't take it out. No, you're looking at the right
At the
one,
top.
but they didn't take it out. There's no angled ceiling
Oh, yeah.
glass.
Okay,
in
'cause I was
the-
gonna say, if that's a safety issue, I don't wanna leave it in one hallway.
For sure, no, couldn't agree more, but I
But there
actually
isn't
told them to take it out. There
Okay.
isn't. Yeah. Yep.
The other question I have is, I know the teacher's lounge is an issue in this building, I mean, it's a tiny little, it's really not a teacher's lounge, right, it's like a little
Correct.
square.
Yep.
Is this, and we have asbestos in that area, which is why we have to start
Correct.
addressing that area to begin with, so we're already starting something, but I mean, this isn't, I remember when we looked at the plans for the front porch, I'll call it, of
Yeah.
Northbrook, and we were like, some of this is like, it would be amazing to have that big concrete seating
Yeah,
area, whatever, but we have to pull back, like, is there anything within this, since we don't get to see like pricing per thing, like totally building out and finishing new lounge, new restrooms, cabinetry, you know, all this stuff, like, are we being very conservative with what this looks like?
Certainly,
Okay.
certainly, and actually, I was nothing short of stunned at what I thought, how inexpensive the teacher's lounge remodel was. It's only $140,000
Okay,
of this, and I thought it would be at least twice that,
okay,
yeah.
alright, just wanna make sure we're not, you know, we're looking at everything, cause
Of
we
course.
went, oh, this is best case scenario, and this is what we can afford.
No, for sure.
And nothing at either of the other 2 schools is planned for the summer at all.
It's accurate.
Where are your thoughts? You know you're closer with these projects than we are.
As long as we do package A, I would be ecstatic with anything above that. I would not, unless I know for sure we're getting solar money in, I don't want this to be anything over $1 million. I think at least from my own personal standpoint on how, you know, I'm CFOing this,
Right.
that's like a terrible internal optic that I can't get over.
No, yeah.
No, that's a,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
But if we took out the building exterior and the teacher's lounge, that's $250 million that's out of package B per se. Would that be smarter?
Obviously from a financial standpoint, yes, right, I mean,
Doing nothing's probably the smartest,
Right,
but.
right.
Yeah.
right, but I do think that we're missing a huge functionality piece with that workroom for the teachers in Northbrook. The teachers in the other two buildings, you know, do have some decent spaces to work in, that just doesn't happen in Northbrook.
Where do they work now, just their classrooms? I assume that space doesn't get used much, or?
Yeah, it gets used for kind of lunches every once in a while, but it's.
But only like a handful of people can sit in there, right?
So
Yeah, you can't,
do they
you
eat
couldn't-
lunch in their own rooms?
Most teams eat together.
In a
In their-
room?
Yeah, there are a couple of teams that do have, you know, that do eat in the workroom,
But
but,
let's say that like you wanted to have lunch for all of them on a certain day, like you couldn't utilize that space to
Oh, no.
like have groups of teachers come together.
no, if you had more than 8 people in that room, you'd be overcrowded.
And what about the restroom situation over there? I'm not familiar with it. Like what are teachers utilizing now?
So there are restrooms in there currently, in the workroom. They're not awesome. It's probably the best way to say that.
Do we have doors in all of our kid bathrooms yet?
No,
We still have curtains.
in one, yes.
I don't think I can go for this whole new plan if we have curtains on our kids' stalls. For real,
I
like,
know, I
didn't
100,
know that.
I 100%.
like that's just crazy to me.
I will,
We
I
went
will
to
pick,
a football game at I can't remember which school it was recently, one of the Mendota games, and they had them on their bathrooms, and I was just like, this is crazy, like, people were like, oops, like, there's no way to lock it, there's no way to secure it, it's just
yeah,
a curtain.
and actually in all, with the exception of the 2 new additions, you know, one of the things that's on our facility list of, you know, a game plan, if we had $12 million, this is what we would do, right?
Right.
We've developed that list, and restrooms are kind of towards the top of that in all but a couple of areas of the campus. So between now and November, I will pick back up with our maintenance director. And,
Otherwise, guys, bring your tool belts, we're gonna build some doors.
gotcha. I'll take care of it, Madam President.
You know, it's been a thorn in my side
I
for a
got
long
you,
time.
I got you. Yep, for sure.
Okay. Any other questions? Again, it's just discussion. So I think if you're thinking of something, or if you wanna see renderings of, stuff, like, do we have renderings of teacher lounge?
Oh, yeah, there'll be a floor plan for sure.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
mean, like, if
okay.
people wanna just see what it
Yep.
looks like and get a feeling, yeah, not full-fledged rendering, sorry. Just a plan to see what
yeah.
that might look like.
And so with, kind of timeline, the world in which we live, and lead times and all that kind of thing, I would really like to have a decision made, by the December board meeting at the latest. The November one would be okay, but the December one is really,
I
no
would
later
just
than.
want to get rid of all the glass all at once. Wish
Where, oh, cause of
all
the
of
side
the angles,
things.
everything.
Well, the angled glass is gonna
Yep.
all be gone.
Yep, that'll all be on. Yep.
Except when we get to 7th, 8th grade too, it's not all gone.
The only other 2 kind of facility notes that I can think of, I just wanna mention it, because it might be a thing. I am kind of kicking around if there's a cost-effective way to, have new bleachers at Northbrook.
You
With
don't like the
backs.
vintage ones?
Which,
I just don't like walking up there and feeling like they're gonna fall on, or slide one direction, or collapse, or.
yeah, yeah, and so, obviously now having an extra $280,000 in the budget, that makes at least those conversations a little more palatable. And the other thing, the other piece is, so we're talking about summer '24. Really, I think I've got a really good game plan in place to be able to, without negatively impacting, our reserves, to be able to completely update the remaining HVAC in the summer of '25. So we would completely take all of our old boilers offline. Dustin and I are working very hard to figure out how to get through Northbrook, through the next 2 winters with what we have at Northbrook. The first, trying to go through a winter on one boiler with a building that size, even though it's not the whole building, it's just the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade wings. If the boiler goes down and we have to cancel classes, yeah, so, I don't know, repairing it's gonna be a lot of money, and it's a lot of money for only 2 winters.
Can you, I thought legally you had to have 2 functioning ones.
No. The other one's just a backup.
Right.
You run one, and then if that one doesn't work, you turn the other one on. So,
2 functioning.
so if, so if we have to spend whatever the number might be, $35,000 to repair a boiler that's only gonna last us for 2 more winters, we might have to do
Do
that.
we know that when we were looking at a project we just did with like all of the HVAC stuff?
Well, I think it was always a part of the conversation to eventually, it was
Yeah, we
just,
talked about it.
yeah, it was just a matter of how much to bite off in one summer. Yeah,
But now you're concerned about like this winter.
I don't,
Like,
right, I don't wanna,
different
I don't
ones.
wanna be in a situation where, at the end of the 7th and 8th grade wing, we can't get a classroom above 50 degrees.
So you're.
Are space heaters and stuff allowed or no?
They are, the regional superintendent won't watch this, they don't like them,
Yeah.
but, yeah, I mean, you know how many space heaters it would take to
Right, I was
get-
just curious,
Yeah.
like, if it was.
Don't they also have like a temporary boiler units, right, that you can bring in and like
Well-
rent a,
The problem is how to hook it into a 80-year-old steam system.
yeah. So so you're bringing this to us right now, do we know how much it costs to repair?
I'm pretty sure we could get it repaired within the next 6 weeks for $40,000, but
And
I,
to replace and redo, what is that amount
oh,
in 2 years per se?
oh, in 2 years? To completely take, and again, this is ballpark, to completely take all the boilers offline in Northbrook and at Blackstone, so when you walk out the door, all of our HVAC systems are up to date and super efficient. I think we've got between $2 and $2.5 million left to spend.
Well, what is your recommendation for winter that starts like in a matter of weeks? What if? What's your what if plan?
So with where we are now, I'm not concerned that the system, we've done a lot of preventative to make sure that everything's up and running, and actually right now it's working too well, right? This week we've had to kick it up on a little bit and teachers have windows open, and so I'm not concerned about it lasting until January.
Okay.
I'm concerned about, once we hit, the first week in February and it's been 3 degrees out for 2 weeks, so. I would think that by the end of next week, Dustin and I will have a game plan on whether or not we know we can get through this winter, or whether or not we're gonna have to bite the bullet and spend money that we don't want to.
Okay.
I'll keep you
And what
posted.
happened between 2 years ago and now? Obviously time, but what was it that specifically that went that we didn't foresee coming in?
I don't think anything, they're whatever, 50, 75-year-old boilers,
Sure.
and so, there was the hope was that by, 2 years ago, taking load off of our existing boilers
Right.
would help us kind of extend their life a little bit, but one of the two main boilers at Northbrook, when we came to get it inspected at the end of the summer, they're like, there's no way we're gonna pass this, you've gotta, major repairs to be able to get it to fire again.
Amanda mentioned this, and I did look through it a little closer. There is still talking about angled ceilings and glass sections within the classrooms on these that are not included in even A. Can you make sure that we get a price with all the angled glass out?
Yep.
Okay. Yes. Brenda, you good? Anything else? Everybody good? 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 Amanda? Good? Okay. Alright, if we have nothing else, let's have a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Yep, good stuff, great conversation, I appreciate it.
Is it something I did?
Yeah, came on.
You could have phoned a friend to come sit with you tonight.
Who's after that here?